Hey guys, tonight, we're taking a snowy detour through the back roads of 17th century Poland, where the air smells faintly of damp hay and wood smoke, and somewhere nearby something with thick fur is snoring. You're waking up in a creaky timber house in a little village where roads are muddy, more often than dry, and your job, believe it or not, involves convincing a bear to dance. Yes, really. Outside, the sun hasn't quite bothered to rise yet. The sky is still that deep velvety gray that suggests it's thinking about snow but hasn't made up its mind. You shuffle over the uneven floorboards to throw on your thick wool coat, its sleeves slightly singed from the time you leaned too close to the fire while trying to dry your socks. The cold hits your face like an insult from a former friend, and as you trudge toward the barn with a lantern, you can already hear the low, wet, huffing breath of your closest companion. The bear. Your bear. He's still asleep, of course, curled up in a huge pile of straw, his enormous snout tucked under one paw. A faint snore bubbles through his jowls. You can smell the hay, the must of his coat, and the faintest hint of sausage stolen the day before. You know today's going to be a long one. There's a noble fair 2 towns over, and you've got to be there before lunch, or the crowd's thin and the coins get stingy. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Drop it in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You give the barn door a tug it sticks, because of course it does, and let yourself inside. The warmth hits you immediately, thick with the earthy scent of the bear and the remnants of last night's turnip stew. He lifts his head at the sound and blinks slowly like he's deciding whether waking up is really worth it. You toss him an apple. It disappears in 2 loud crunches. Historians still argue whether these early Polish bear trainers, known locally as mischnesi, were a formal guild, or more of a loose, smelly brotherhood. But one thing's certain, they were known across Eastern Europe for their skill in raising and performing with bears, often passed down from father to son like a particularly hairy family heirloom. Your bear's name is Wojtek, not that. Wojtek, the famous Łabiłaty's military bear, but a different, lazier Wojtek who once fell asleep during a performance and refused to get up until someone waved a sausage in his face. He's a brown bear, technically wild by species, but he's been raised in captivity since cubhood. You got him when he was roughly the size of a large dog and dangerously curious about table legs. Most mischnesi got their cubs from trappers who raided dens during the spring thaws. Yes, that sounds awful now. And it kind of was even then. But life in the 1600s was full of difficult decisions, including, do I raise this bear or try to make money? Making candles out of pig fat. Raising a bear gave you a traveling companion, a meal ticket, and if you trained him well, a sort of warm, lumbering business partner who would never judge your singing voice. This morning you light the fire in the stove, ladle out some of the porridge from yesterday, and blow on your spoon while the bear licks his lips like a large, furry metronome. He eats out of a wooden bucket, making sloppy, appreciative noises that echo off the beams. You meanwhile chew in silence and wonder if you remembered to pack enough bread for the road. There's a surprising intimacy to living with a bear. You've long stopped noticing the smell. You know exactly which creaking floorboard he likes to nap on. You've learned the delicate art of brushing his winter coat without accidentally turning it into a wrestling match. He's the only one who never complains when you rehearse your banjo tunes for the 50th time. Outside, the village is waking up. Smoke curls from chimneys, a few chickens grumble about the cold, and somewhere a child is already yelling for jam. You hitch up your cart. Well, it's more like a sled with dreams of grandeur, and the bear hops in without fuss. He's got his little performance bell strapped to one ankle and a sack of treats tucked next to him like a bribe he fully understands. The road to the next town is frozen solid. Each crunch of the wheels is loud in the sleepy silence. A dog runs alongside you for a while, barking indignantly at the bear who doesn't bother to respond. He's gazing at the fields, lost in bear thoughts that probably involve turnips and questionable dance steps. You pass other travelers, mostly peasants, with baskets, a merchant cart wobbling under the weight of beets, and one very determined goat. No one reacts much to the bear. He's a known face on these roads. Kids wave, adults nod. The occasional noble on horseback looks vaguely amused, as if trying to decide whether this is charming or just deeply Polish. You reach the crossroads sign. It's got 3 destinations on it, none spelled the same way twice. You turn left toward a village whose name sounds like someone sneezing into a bucket. That's where your first performance of the day will be. It's a modest gig, someone's wedding celebration, but you know the crowd will be lively, and lively means generous, especially if the bear does the thing with the hat. As the sun rises higher, casting long pink light across the fields, you hum a song under your breath. The bear starts to snore softly again in the back of the cart, swaying with each bump like a massive furry metronome. You smile. It's going to be a strange day. But then again, that's just another Tuesday. When your co-worker weighs 400 pounds and once ate a priest's hat. You pull into the village around mid-morning, your cart creaking to a halt in front of a small, crooked inn with a sign that proudly depicts an animal of some kind, possibly a wolf, possibly a weasel, possibly the artist was drunk. The scent of roasting onions and stale beer drifts on the wind. Somewhere behind the inn, someone is either chopping wood or angrily disciplining a turnip. The bear your bear opens one eye as if to say, "We've done this before." You nod. You both have your roles to play. This is the sort of place where everyone knows everyone else's secrets, and most of them involve goats. As you clamber down from the cart, people begin to gather, not out of surprise but habit. Word travels fast here. Faster than carriages, faster than gossip, and definitely faster than your bear, who is currently scratching his side with what looks like a minor expression of ecstasy. This particular village is known for 2 things: bratwurst and arguments about bratwurst. You've learned not to compliment anyone's recipe unless you're willing to sample 17 variations and rank them while being stared at by increasingly offended grandmothers. You once lost an entire afternoon to a bratwurst-based duel. It involved tongs and mild name-calling. Wojtek, meanwhile, has perked up. He smells sausage. His nose twitches dramatically. You don't even try to hold him back as he ambles toward the source of the scent, an open kitchen window, where someone has foolishly left a cooling tray of sizzling, perfectly browned bratwursts. You jog after him, boots crunching on frost. By the time you reach the window, Wojtek has very politely removed exactly 1 sausage, sat down, and is now chewing it slowly with what could only be described as serene satisfaction. You tip your cap to the kitchen maid, who's just appeared, arms crossed and mouth twitching between outrage and awe. "I'll pay for it," you offer. "You always do," she replies, turning on her heel with theatrical huffing. Raising a bear is like raising a child who never grows out of the chewing on furniture phase. In many Polish villages, cubs raised for performance lived right in the family home. People made space where they could an extra straw bed in the barn, a corner of the kitchen, cordoned off with barrels and whatever old coats were lying around. Sometimes the cubs shared quarters with human children. Sometimes the children learned to wrestle better than their parents. Your own cub back in the day was terrified of spoons, but loved the sound of rain on the roof. He used to sleep curled up in a wash tub until he got too big, and broke it with an enthusiastic yawn. There's still an old neighbor who swears she once saw him trying to mimic your grandfather sneezing. Historians still argue whether these early cohabitations were acts of desperation, affection, or plain confusion. The line between pet and performer blurred quickly. In a home where livestock might live under the same roof to conserve heat, a bear wasn't so unusual, just another hungry mouth that occasionally stole your mittens and dragged them into the soup pot. You lead Wojtek to the village square where a patch of dirt has been cleared of snow. A ring of children forms almost instantly. Some of them are carrying small potatoes. You have no idea why. Maybe it's tradition. You perform a little warm-up introducing the bear with a bow and a short song played on your slightly out-of-tune hurdy-gurdy. The bear, ever the professional, lumbers into position and waits for his cue. You click your tongue, raise your arm, and whistle twice. He does the spin, the one they love. It's not graceful. It's not even particularly rhythmic. But there's something about a bear slowly twirling on his hind legs that triggers spontaneous applause and a few confused tears. This, of course, is where your role becomes critical. You must toss treats at just the right angle, clap on the offbeat for comic effect, and occasionally play dead for the audience. Once in Lublin, a local dignitary actually believed you'd been fatally mauled and began composing your eulogy on the spot. The bear licked your face, you twitched, and the man fainted into a crate of cabbage. You end the performance with the signature bow. Wojtek sniffs the ground as if to say, "I did this under protest," but he accepts his final treat with quiet dignity. The crowd disperses, children giggling and old women muttering something that sounds suspiciously like matchmaking. Someone hands you a bratwurst unbidden. It is slightly burnt and deeply heartfelt. You accept it like a peace offering. You settle on a bench outside the inn, your bear lounging beside you like a rug that occasionally grunts. You eat slowly, the grease warming your fingertips. A dog saunters past and thinks better of approaching. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster screams inappropriately late for the hour. The thing about raising a bear, especially one meant for dancing, is that you begin to understand patience on a cellular level. They don't learn quickly, they don't respond well to yelling, and they absolutely will not do something unless they feel like it, unless snacks are involved. That's the secret of the bratwurst. It's not just food, it's motivation, it's emotional currency. Historians aren't sure how early bear trainers discovered the power of food-based bribery, but some believe it may have originated from observing how cubs naturally mimic human actions if they think it'll lead to a treat. Wave a sausage, and the bear waves back. Clap your hands, and eventually the bear figures out there's a link between action and reward. Some fringe scholars even claim that certain bear cubs learn to recognize musical cues, though this is often dismissed as optimistic storytelling by old men in taverns. Then again, you swear Wojtek once reacted to the sound of a hurdy-gurdy being tuned from 3 streets away. Coincidence? Probably. But it makes a good story over soup. As the day winds on and the sun lowers itself like a tired potato into the horizon, you ready your cart for travel once more. The bear climbs in with a grunt. You check the sausage pouch. Still enough for one more show. Maybe 2 if you don't let him sneak any while you're not looking. The road beckons. You leave behind the smell of bratwurst and burning logs, the whispers of children, and a widow who still insists your bear once stole her bonnet. It was probably true. The snow begins to fall again, soft and slow, like flour through a lazy baker's fingers. The road stretches out before you, winding like a lazy thought through frost-bitten fields and threadbare trees. Your boots thud against the packed earth as you walk beside the cart, letting Wojtek ride like the moody celebrity he is. He watches the landscape with half-lidded eyes, the kind of slow, pensive gaze usually reserved for poets or cows. Today is a training day. Not for you, not really. You've had your routines down for years. It's your bear who still needs the occasional refresher. Especially with the winter slowing him down and the bratwurst motivation running a bit thin. And let's be honest, you need to stretch your legs anyway after yesterday's awkward nap in a hay cart that smelled suspiciously like pickled beets. You find a quiet clearing off the side of the road. A patch of frozen grass surrounded by skeletal birch trees. The air smells like pine needles and old bark, and the silence is so perfect you can hear your joints pop when you squat down. Wojtek tumbles out of the cart with a snort, shakes his fur until it fluffs like a badly washed rug, and plods over to sniff a suspicious log. You pull out the treat pouch and begin your morning routine. Up, you say, gently tapping your shoulder twice. He blinks. You rustle the pouch. The ears perk. Up. Slowly, and with a grunt that sounds like an old man refusing to stand for church, Wojtek rises on his hind legs. He sways slightly, less from dizziness and more from boredom, and gives you a look that could only be interpreted as, "Is this really necessary?" This is how you trained him from the start, small gestures repeated often paired with food, and a truly unreasonable amount of patience. A bear doesn't respond well to shouting. He responds to tone, to rhythm, and most importantly, to pork. You toss him a treat. He catches it. Progress. Historians still argue whether bear training techniques in early Poland were taught formally or passed down through storytelling and imitation. Some suggest there were unwritten codes shared across traveling performers. Others believe everyone just sort of made it up as they went along, adjusting their methods depending on how stubborn their bear happened to be that week. You were trained by your uncle who believed in the firm tone, softer snack method. He also swore that singing off-key during training helped the bear learn to ignore distractions. Convenient considering your uncle couldn't carry a tune if it had handles. The second routine is spin. A slow turn counterclockwise, followed by a bow. You click your tongue, raise your arm, and whistle twice. Nothing. You try again, adding a little hop. Wojtek scratches himself and sneezes. Not your finest morning, you murmur, digging out a larger treat. This one's sausage wrapped in stale bread, practically a holiday meal. That gets results. He lumbers into a slow-motion spin, ends it by flopping into a sit, and sneezes again for good measure. You clap. He blinks. Training isn't just for performance, it keeps the bond between you strong. It's how you read each other. You notice the stiffness in his left leg. Maybe a pulled muscle from yesterday's performance. Or maybe he's just milking it because he didn't get 2 sausages. You let him rest scratching behind his ears where the fur is thickest. He leans into it with a low, pleased grumble. The sound rumbles through your gloves. Sometimes you think about what it would be like if you had chosen a different life. Cobbling shoes, perhaps. Minding goats. But none of those paths would have given you this peculiar connection to a creature who could crush you with one paw, but instead chooses to dance because you asked him nicely. The clearing is quiet again. A single crow squawks somewhere nearby, startled by nothing. A cold wind stirs the branches, sending a flurry of icy needles down the back of your neck. You sigh and rise, knees popping like kettle corn. Time for the final drill hat trick. You place your battered cap on the ground, then point at it with exaggerated flair. Wojtek knows the routine. He waddles over, lowers his nose, and very delicately picks up the hat in his teeth. Then he walks back and plops it on your head with all the grace of a drunken butler. You toss him a handful of treats. He licks your hand, then tries to eat your mitten. Close enough, you say, pulling it back. Fringe scholars once suggested that the hat routine had origins in ancient Slavic rituals, ceremonial mimicry, and theatrical bowing, but most serious historians chalk it up to crowd-pleasing showmanship. People like to laugh, and bears putting hats on people tend to make people laugh, especially after their 3rd mug of beer. You take a break on a fallen log. The bear curls up at your feet, his breath steaming into the cold air. For a moment, all is still. Then, of course, the log shifts beneath you. It isn't a log. It's a frozen boar carcass, possibly left behind by hunters. You leap up with an undignified yelp. The bear doesn't react. He opens one eye, sees no snacks involved, and goes back to napping. This is training life. Small victories, occasional horrors, frequent snack-related negotiations. You gather your things. The sun is climbing. Time to make the next village before the frost softens into mud. You whistle once, and the bear rumbles to his feet, stretching like a giant accordion made of fur and meat. Back on the cart, you glance behind you one last time at the clearing. A perfect little patch of morning preserved in frost and the faint imprint of bear tracks. As you roll away, Wojtek sneezes into the wind and settles down again, nose tucked under paw. You murmur, "Good boy," even though you're fairly sure he's ignoring you. He earned it. The cartwheels bump gently over ruts in the icy road as you hum your favorite traveling tune, a half-forgotten melody your grandfather used to whistle when sharpening knives. Wojtek rides in the back like royalty, occasionally adjusting his massive rear end for comfort and sniffing the air with theatrical suspicion every time a squirrel dashes through the underbrush. You're headed toward a small town with a reputation for feasts and fiddlers. Rogau. Population variable, as one local told you, depending on how many people are sober enough to be counted. There's a noble's birthday happening today, and you've been hired to provide what the note described, written in looping, very enthusiastic ink, as rustic merriment, which in noble terms generally means bring the bear. Make him dance. As you approach, you catch sight of the manor timber-framed roof sagging slightly, a chicken somehow perched on its chimney. The main square bustles with energy. Laughter bubbles through the cold air, mingling with the smell of roasted parsnips and slightly burned bread. Two fiddlers are warming up with a tune that sounds suspiciously like "The Goose Stole My Wife." Wojtek stirs. He knows that music usually leads to snacks. You stop just outside the square to prepare. The noble's men are setting up a makeshift performance space, raking straw over the cobblestones to cushion potential bear mishaps. You strap on Wojtek's ankle bell, a small worn bronze thing with a gentle jingle, more fit for a holiday sheep than a beast who could crush a wagon wheel. The crowd parts as you enter. Children gasp. Someone claps prematurely. A man with 3 teeth shouts, "It's the Hat Bear," and you nod politely as if that's a title you're proud of. You bow. Wojtek lumbers forward and raises one paw, imitating your gesture. The crowd erupts in delighted confusion. The first dance is the classic "The Krakow Shuffle." This isn't an official name, but it's what you call the slow 3-step wobble that Wojtek does when you whistle in rhythm. Step to the left, hop turn in place. It looks vaguely like he's dodging an imaginary mouse, but the crowd loves it. Especially because he ends the routine with a deep bow and a dramatically expectant sniff toward the treat pouch. You hand over a carrot just to keep him humble. Historians still debate the origins of these dances. Were they derived from folk traditions or improvised from bear behaviors that look like they could pass for choreography? There's no formal record, but some scholars point to illustrations in old Polish manuscripts showing bears standing upright, arms raised, surrounded by delighted peasants who appear very tipsy. It's likely that the dance came first and the interpretation followed. The second routine today is trickier, the nobleman's greeting. Wojtek must rise, shuffle forward, and extend one paw as if to shake hands. You introduce this move after watching a particularly pompous baron insist on hand-kissing from everyone, including his chickens. You cue Wojtek. He stands steps forward and promptly sneezes on the birthday boy's boots. There's a brief moment of social paralysis. The noble's eyebrow twitches. You freeze halfway between panic and apology. Then, to your eternal relief, the noble bursts out laughing. "Even your bear hates these shoes," he shouts, and the crowd roars in agreement. You reward Wojtek with a plum. He doesn't love plums, but you're out of sausage and he'll eat it out of spite. After the show, you and Wojtek retire to the side of the square, both sweating slightly despite the chill. Several children approach to ask if they can pet him. You politely decline. One girl offers him her mitten instead. He sniffs it, then places his paw on her head with shocking gentleness. Her mother nearly faints. In the corner of the square, a toothless accordionist nods to you. He knows 2 dances, he says. That's one more than most of the men in this town. You grin. He's working on a 3rd. There's an art to keeping a bear show entertaining. Not every crowd wants the same thing. Some prefer slow, stately movements. Others love slapstick. Your famous routine where the bear steals your hat, wears it, then tries to eat it, never fails. That one was discovered by accident when Wojtek got hungry during a rainstorm. One time in Bydgoszcz, a noble insisted the bear dance with his wife. She tripped, the bear caught her, and they both ended up sliding down a muddy slope behind the house. The party roared with laughter. You spent the rest of the evening drying the bear with embroidered tablecloths and wondering if you'd be charged for assault. There are always risks. The bear is an animal, after all, big, unpredictable, and occasionally moody. But Wojtek has never hurt anyone. You've raised him to be calm, predictable. He knows that food follows performance, and he loves an audience. At least you think he does. He grumbles less during applause. After your performance, the noble sends out a plate of roast turnips and a warm bowl of soup, both of which Wojtek eyes like they personally offended him. You eat while perched on a barrel, rubbing your sore feet and listening to the fiddle music swirl into the dusk. You watch your bear lying in a patch of hay completely relaxed, letting two toddlers pile scarves on his back like a slightly confused snowman. One of them tries to braid his ear fur. He doesn't seem to mind. You think about how far you've come together. From a scrawny cub afraid of thunder to this cheeky beloved and very slightly famous. The fiddlers play one last song. Someone in the crowd begins to dance their boots, thudding lightly on the straw-covered stones. The noble claps out of sync. The cook yells that she's out of soup. And somewhere nearby, a goose honks ominously. You'll worry about that later. For now, you lean back, rub your bear's side, and exhale a long cloud of warm breath into the night air. Dawn seeps through the cracks of your cart's canvas like a bashful guest, pale and cold. You're already awake thanks to Wojtek rolling over in his sleep and nearly pushing the cart off its wooden wheels. His dreams must have been intense, possibly about cabbage, possibly about vengeance. Today's destination is 2 villages over, but the road winds like a gossip's tongue, narrow-rutted and occasionally confused about whether it's even a road at all. You hitch up the cart, give the bear his breakfast, 2 boiled eggs, and a dried beet, which he accepts with the disdain of royalty, eating prison rations, and set off before the frost fully melts. By midday, you've reached Wolka, a trading hub where 3 dialects argue constantly, and none of them are correct. It's a market day, which means packed stalls haggling farmers and the occasional brawl over onion pricing. Your cart squeaks dramatically as you roll in Wojtek, lounging in the back with one paw lazily flopped over the edge like a sleepy diplomat. Your goal. Perform just long enough to earn tips, but not so long, you're asked to pay for vendor permits. You wheel into a clear patch near the turnip seller and set up with the precision of a seasoned street artist. You even tie a little ribbon around Wojtek's neck blue with a tiny embroidered duck. He hates it. You love it. There's something magical about performing in open-air markets. The smells alone are enough to send you into a culinary coma. Roasted chestnuts, boiled barley, stale mead, something suspiciously fishy. The chatter is a symphony of barter and complaint. Somewhere a lute player hits the same note 14 times. Art. You whistle twice. Wojtek rises on cue and begins the signature move, the 2-paw hop. It's exactly what it sounds like and precisely as ridiculous. He hops forward twice, then sits down dramatically. The audience adores it. A few people toss coins into your upturned cap. One child offers a pickle. Another offers his father's shoe, which you return with a raised brow and a subtle shrug. Some gifts are better left unaccepted. Historians still argue whether bear trainers at these markets were considered respectable artisans or tolerated nuisances. In towns like Wolka, bear men were sometimes banned from performing near churches, cheese vendors, or fountains, though no one's exactly sure why. A famous ordinance from 1612 reads, "No beast may twirl upon the stones adjacent to his reverence's soup stall." Curious, suspicious, mildly poetic. You pause for a break and pull out your lunch, a hunk of bread and soft cheese. that's trying very hard to become hard cheese. Wojtek watches with the intensity of a poet composing a heartbreak sonnet. You give him a corner. He accepts it with visible disappointment. After your second routine, an improvised bit involving a dropped turnip and Wojtek pretending it's cursed, you're approached by a minor noble. You know he's minor because his hat has only one feather and it's slightly limp. "You there," he says, voice syrupy with authority. "Have you the papers for your beast?" You blink slowly. Papers. Yes. He continues, clearly enjoying this. Travel papers, seals, perhaps a monastic blessing. The usual. In truth, bear passports weren't entirely a joke. While not formal passports in the modern sense, many bear trainers did carry documents proving ownership training or payment of a beast tax. These slips of parchment, often smudged and questionably signed, were waved about to avoid fines or worse, bear confiscation. You pull out your own scrap, a stained, cracked certificate from the village headman confirming that Wojtek was reasonably tame and very unlikely to eat a bishop. The noble reads it upside down, sniffs, and hands it back like it's diseased. "Carry on," he says, vanishing into the crowd with the urgency of someone avoiding responsibility. Wojtek sneezes on your sleeve. You wipe it with professional dignity. Your bear has traveled dozens of villages. You've crossed rivers on rafts, snow-packed roads, even once hitched a ride in the back of a brewer's wagon. You've seen towns where people toss flowers, and towns where someone threw a cabbage so large it nearly knocked Wojtek over. He ate it. Vindictively. Each town brings its own set of questions. Does he do tricks? Does he bite? Can I ride him? The answers, respectively. Yes, but only for sausage. Only when provoked, and absolutely not madam. The towns also vary in how they treat you. In some, you're the star. In others, just an interruption before mass. But the children love Wojtek. They giggle at his steps, gasp when he bows, and often ask if he understands Polish. You always reply, only when it's polite. As the sun dips behind a crooked church tower, you count your coins, enough for soup and straw, and give Wojtek a small roasted beet as a reward. He hates beets. He eats it anyway. That's love. You pack up slowly, letting the market dissolve around you. A butcher yells at a boy for stealing bacon. An old woman sweeps her stall with a broom made of bound twigs and gossip. The lute player has moved on to a new song, possibly by accident. You and Wojtek head toward the edge of town where a barn has been offered as lodging. The roof leaks the hay smells of sheep perfume, and the door creaks like it holds secrets. Perfect. You spread a blanket over straw. Wojtek circles 3 times before collapsing with a sigh. You lie down beside him, the soft rustle of hay cushioning your back. Outside, an owl hoots. Inside, your bear snores gently, his paw twitching as he dreams. Maybe of passports, maybe of dancing, maybe just of that blue ribbon you keep making him wear. Waking up in a stranger's barn is a lot like waking up in your own, just colder, dustier, and with a higher chance of mysterious puddles. You stir slowly, stretching under your itchy wool blanket, while Wojtek continues to sleep beside you, his snore vibrating the floorboards. A nearby rooster crows, with the sort of unearned confidence only roosters can manage. You sit up and brush hay from your hair. Your breath fogs in the air, which means breakfast will be cold unless you bribe someone for a bowl of soup. You glance at your coin pouch. It jingles just enough to be hopeful. Wojtek finally lifts his head, yawns wide enough to reveal a molar the size of a walnut, and grunts as he rises. He shakes himself, scattering straw, and one very surprised beetle across the barn floor. Today's plan is simple. Nothing extravagant, no court performances or regional festivals. Just a few village stops, some casual dancing, and ideally no run-ins with upset nobles or offended geese. You gather your things, tighten the harness on the cart, and set out on the morning road. The crisp air is quiet, broken only by the crunch of hooves and wheels on frozen soil. The frost sparkles on the fields like nature's own spilled sugar. You hum softly, half to yourself, half to Wojtek, who is now lounging in the cart with an expression that says, "I am a professional, and this is beneath me." The first village is little more than a loop of cottages and one particularly ambitious bakery. You perform at the square just a small crowd this time, children, a few old men, and one woman who might be judging your posture. Wojtek does the basics, the two-paw hop the hat trick, and a lazy spin that earns polite claps. You get paid mostly in copper coins and what appears to be a bag of stewed apples. You don't ask questions. Food is food. As you pack up, a man approaches. He's wearing a wide hat and chewing a pipe like it owes him money. "You the bear fellow?" he asks. "I'm not the goat fellow, so yes," you reply. He chuckles, then digs into his pocket and hands you a small silver coin. "Saw you in Sandomier's 3 winters back. My boy still talks about it," said the bear, bowed like a gentleman. Wojtek sneezes in acknowledgement. This is what mild celebrity looks like in 17th century Poland, a pipe chewer remembering your act, a child talking about your bear like he's a hero, and silver coins that don't smell too strongly of turnips. Not bad, really. You continue onward to the next village. The road is bumpier here, and you have to stop twice, once to fix a wheel, and once because Wojtek refused to continue until you handed over a chunk of dry bread. He holds out for the good stuff now. Fame has gone to his head. You reach the next town by early afternoon. It's larger with a real inn, a smithy, and a suspiciously elaborate water trough. You set up near the fountain, which is currently frozen and decorated with what you assume is an accidental pigeon sculpture. The crowd is livelier here. You start with a joke about dancing priests and finish with a flourish Wojtek, wearing your hat, bowing so low his nose brushes the snow. Laughter claps even a whistle. After the performance, a merchant offers you a half-wheel of cheese in exchange for a private bear moment. You agree and let him pet Wojtek's shoulder, while murmuring something that might be a lullaby or a sales pitch. Historians still argue whether this kind of public performance contributed to a sort of grassroots fame for traveling bear trainers. Some claim the bear acts served as early entertainment for the common people, accessible, humorous, and oddly soothing. Others say the shows were tolerated only because they distracted the masses from complaining about tax hikes or plague rumors. You just know that every town brings someone who recognizes the hat trick. A few even ask if your bear is the one who once ate the mayor's potatoes. He isn't. But you nod anyway. Why ruin the legend? Wojtek, meanwhile, lounges beside the cart, licking melted snow from his paw and occasionally sighing like a bored poet. He's had 3 snacks, 2 naps, and a lady tried to braid his tail. He's having a solid day. As the sky shifts toward evening gold, you wander toward the inn in hopes of a warm meal. You're seated near the fire with Wojtek curled under the table, like a very large, mildly suspicious dog. The other patrons give him a wide berth, but no one protests. The innkeeper sends over a plate of cabbage stew and a hunk of bread, big enough to qualify as a small door. You eat slowly, enjoying the warmth. The fire crackles. A man begins to play a fiddle near the hearth. The bear snores with rhythmic contentment, and you find yourself smiling into your soup. This is the strange life you've built, part performer, part traveler, part man, who has memorized exactly which inns allow indoor bears. And while it may not be glamorous, it's comfortable, predictable in its unpredictability. As you finish your meal, the merchant from earlier returns. He sits beside you, sipping something too clear to be water. "You ever think about taking the bear to Warsaw?" he asks. You shrug. "And do what make him minister of sausage?" He laughs. "No, I mean real stages, proper crowds, nobles with purses heavy as gilt. They'd love him." You consider it for a moment. The idea of actual theater's velvet curtains applause not just from farmers and curious geese. It's tempting. But then you look under the table at Wojtek, snoring through his snout curled like a bear-shaped potato. He wouldn't like velvet. He likes mud wind and the quiet clink of coins in your cap. You shake your head. He's not built for velvet. The merchant nods, eyes twinkling. Neither are you. You raise your cup in toast. To simplicity, to sausage, to small fame and snoring bears. Night on the road has a rhythm of its own, slower, softer, but never truly silent. You and Wojtek find a place to rest just outside a crossroads village where the trees thin out and the stars shine a little too brightly, as if the sky's trying to make up for the lack of anything else. The barn you've been offered grudgingly is half full of onions and smells like the inside of a forgotten stew pot. You don't ask too many questions. The hay is dry, the walls don't groan too much, and best of all, it's free. In exchange, you've promised to let the farmer's grandchildren see the bear in the morning. A bargain, really. You spread your blanket across a hay pile and take off your boots, which immediately attempt to collapse in protest. Wojtek flops down nearby with a grunt, curling his massive form into a shape that defies geometry. His breath steams in the cold air, rising and curling like sleepy ghosts. As you settle in, your ears catch the distant sound of a lute faint, probably from the tavern 2 fields away. Someone's singing too, although their tune meanders like a drunk goose looking for breadcrumbs. You let your body sink into the straw. It's scratchy, a little moldy, and definitely harbors a few overly ambitious beetles. But it's warm. Warmer still with a bear nearby radiating heat like a furry furnace. This is what most nights look like for you, a patch of someone else's barn, shared with a creature that snores like a wheezy accordion. There are better lodgings in theory, but none with as much character. Or bear farts. You close your eyes, letting the sounds of the barn wrap around you, creaking beams, rustling straw, the occasional disgruntled cluck from a chicken who's definitely not supposed to be in here. Wojtek sighs and shifts in his sleep, his back pressing against yours like a big breathing pillow. The smell is complicated. A blend of damp fur leftover turnips and the ever-present essence of bear. You've gotten used to it. Others have not. One time, a tavern maid fainted when Wojtek sneezed near the stew pot. The stew was fine, arguably improved. Historians still argue whether traveling bear trainers often shared sleeping quarters with their animals or kept them separate for safety. Evidence suggests both practices were common depending on the temperament of the bear and the sturdiness of the available housing. You're in the share, a roof, gain, a foot warmer camp. Some fringe accounts even describe bears curling around their handlers during harsh winters, acting as living blankets in places where firewood was scarce and frostbite was unreasonably enthusiastic. You believe it. Wojtek has saved you from frozen toes more than once, even if he sometimes hogs the hay. You drift into a shallow doze, half lulled by the bear's rhythmic breathing. But of course it doesn't last. A loud thunk jerks you awake. You sit bolt upright, the blanket sliding to the floor. Wojtek doesn't move, clearly dreaming of something that involves licking. You listen. Another thunk. Then a scrabble. A raccoon, perhaps. A very motivated chicken. You get up creaking like a haunted cupboard and peer around the barn. In the far corner, a figure rustles near the onion sacks. You squint. It's a goat, wearing what appears to be a bonnet. You stare at it. It stares back. Neither of you blinks. Then with a proud huff, it knocks over a pail and marches out through a hole in the wall. You return to your bedding in silence, unsure whether to tell anyone. You decide not to. Some things are better left as private hallucinations. As you settle again, the bear rolls over and flings one paw across your chest. It's surprisingly gentle, like a weighted blanket filled with rocks and potential lawsuits. You pat his fur. He grumbles softly, then settles. This is your life. Each night is different. Some nights you sleep under stars swatting mosquitoes and swearing at owls. Others you're in guest rooms above inns trying to explain to the maid why there's a bear in the bed. And sometimes, like tonight, you're wedged between straw bales and onions, hoping the goat doesn't return with friends. Once during a midsummer tour, you stayed in a stable so fine the horses had better pillows than you. Wojtek kept trying to steal one. Another time you slept under a bridge serenaded by frogs and watched over by a man who may or may not have been a wizard. He gave Wojtek a pickle and vanished into mist. You've learned to find rest wherever you can, to embrace the odd, to laugh when your bed is shared by a bear and a suspicious sock that isn't yours. Tonight, as the wind picks up outside, you pull your blanket tighter and breathe in the warm, musty scent of the bear beside you. He snores again, long and low like a distant thunder roll. You smile. You're safe. You're fed. And your only real concern is whether the goat told anyone. Sleep finally begins to pull you under soft and slow like the lull of wagon wheels or the hush of falling snow. In the morning there will be more roads, more children laughing, more towns where someone calls you the bear man like it's the best compliment they can imagine. But for now there is only this barn, this breath, and this very contented bear. You wake to the gentle sound of something being very much destroyed. It's not the roof, not the cart, not even your fragile dreams of buying new socks this month. It's Wojtek. He's managed to wedge his head into a bucket, and judging by the noises clanging, scraping one very muffled snort, he's now wearing it like a helmet. You sit up wiping straw from your face and sigh. Loudly. The goat mercifully has not returned. You retrieve the bucket from your bear with a tug and a grunt. He shakes his head once, then sneezes into your chest. A morning blessing. You nod solemnly and hand him an apple. Breakfast is a quiet affair. A bit of bread for you, a slightly overripe pear for him, and a promise to avoid small metal containers for at least the rest of the day. You clean up the barn, leave a few coins for the onion owner's trouble, and hit the road before the sun has fully climbed above the trees. Your destination today is Krakow, or rather a bustling outer market just shy of the city gates. You've performed there before, and while the crowds are generous, the stage is a rickety plank near the goose cellar. It's a risky location. The geese are territorial. Still, the coin is good, and the people are cheerful, so you make your way along the cobbled road cart, rattling behind you. Wojtek walks this morning, his belly full and his mood agreeable. You whistle a tune. He huffs in harmony. As the gates of the city appear in the distance, you brace yourself. The Krakow market is by any measure chaos with vegetables. Vendors shout. Children run under carts. Someone's selling pig-themed pottery. Someone else is selling pigs. You're barely inside the square before a man wearing 3 hats tries to rent your bear for a birthday party. You decline. Politely. You find your spot near the fountain beside the goose merchant. The geese are already watching you. Eyes narrowed feathers fluffed like they've been waiting for this moment. One of them honks with clear intent. You unpack quickly. Hat check. Treat pouch check. Emergency goose distraction sausage check. You nod to Wojtek, who yawns dramatically. Time to work. You start with a little tune, clapping your hands to the beat. The crowd gathers fast. The children recognize you, the hat bear, the dancing bear, the one who once sneezed on a merchant's wig. You give the signal. Wojtek rises. He spins. He bows. He does the 2-paw hop. Then, just as the applause begins, it happens. A goose charges. It's not a slow waddle or a lazy peck. It's a full, wing-flapping, feet-slapping, beak-thrusting declaration of war. And it's headed straight for the bear. Wojtek freezes mid-hop. The goose honks again, lower this time, like a battle cry. The crowd gasps. Coins pause mid-air. Wojtek steps back. The goose advances. You shout. The goose ignores you. The bear turns sideways, unsure of the protocol. He has fought many things, boredom, large cabbages, and overzealous accordionist. But this goose has no fear, only fury. And so Wojtek does the only thing he can. He sits down, hard, right on the goose's path. The goose skids, honks in protest, and slides directly into the bear's haunch with a dull pomp. Feathers erupt like popcorn in a hot pan. Silence. Then uproarious laughter. The merchant with the hats collapses in glee. A child shrieks he sat on it and runs in circles. The goose retreats, dignity-wounded feathers askew, muttering curses in goose language. Wojtek licks his paw. The performance continues. You carry on pretending it was all part of the act. You bow. The bear bows. Someone tosses you a smoked fish. Victory. Historians still argue whether animals like geese were regular hazards at markets or if Krakow's particular flock had developed a taste for violence. Some fringe theories suggest trained geese were used to guard stalls, a kind of squawking security system. Whether true or not, you now consider them your natural nemeses. After the show, you count your earnings more than you expected. The goose incident was clearly a hit. Wojtek lies in a patch of sun entirely unbothered by his moment of avian combat. A man approaches. Elderly, cloaked in layers, carrying a bundle of rosemary and what appears to be a bundle of cats in his coat. He nods at the bear. Did well, he says. You nod. Goose had it coming, he adds, then walks away. You agree. Later you buy 2 bowls of hot stew, one for you, one for Wojtek. He doesn't like turnips, but he slurps it up anyway. You sit on the edge of the square, watching the sun lower behind the rooftops. You're tired. The day was long. Your ribs ache from laughing too hard, your boots squelch in places they shouldn't, and your bear smells like feathers and faint triumph. But you're full. You're paid. And you've won a battle against a small, furious goose. As night falls, you find a place near the city edge to rest. An old cooper offers space behind his workshop, and you set up your blanket on the cool cobblestone. Wojtek curls beside you, fur rising and falling with deep, sleepy breaths. You reach out and pat his back. You won. He snorts, once rolls over, and dreams possibly of fame, possibly of soup, possibly of geese. The next morning, you're packing up the cart while Wojtek sprawls nearby, chewing on a stick with exaggerated purpose. His fur is still faintly feather-scented from yesterday's goose encounter, and you're fairly sure he's proud of it. You hum as you work organizing your cluttered pile of props, hats, and emergency snacks. That's when you see him. A man in a wide, dark robe striding across the square like a judgmental cloud. His pace is firm, his expression carved from stern oak, and his hat. Well, it's the kind of hat that suggests he's banned several enjoyable things in his time. You recognize the look. This is a churchman. Wojtek does not. He continues chewing his stick and gazing at the world like it owes him nothing, and he's fine with that. "Are you the keeper of the dancing bear?" the man intones in a voice that makes bread go stale. You nod, trying not to sigh too audibly. "Keeper, friend, taxpayer. Depends who's asking. I am Bishop Prenke, and I have concerns." Ah, he folds his arms and narrows his eyes at Wojtek, who has now shifted to licking his own paw with lazy commitment. "You parade this beast like a court jester," the bishop declares. "Do you not see the sin in turning God's creatures into entertainers for coin?" You raise an eyebrow. He also snores and refuses to walk uphill. Is that a sin too? The bishop does not laugh. Historians still debate the church's stance on animal performers during this period. Some clergy tolerated bear shows as harmless diversions, while others saw them as vulgar spectacles that encouraged idleness and gluttony, two of the 7 deadly sins. Fringe theologians even argued over whether dancing bears had souls, which quickly spiraled into a heated debate involving cats, parrots, and a goat that allegedly recited psalms. This bishop clearly falls into the absolutely not category. He steps closer to the bear and points a finger like he's about to deliver a sermon. Wojtek yawns. The bishop flinches. "I will be speaking to the mayor," he says, "and possibly the magistrate." You nod slowly. "Shall I tell the bear, or do you want to?" The bishop turns on his heel and marches away in a huff so powerful it kicks up some nearby sawdust. You and Wojtek exchange a look. He returns to his paw. "You've had run-ins like this before. Some towns think you're delightful. Others think you're a gateway to moral collapse. Once a preacher in a riverside village declared your hat routine blasphemous mimicry. You asked if he'd ever danced with a bear. He threw a boot at you. Still, these run-ins are becoming more frequent, especially as you perform in bigger towns. Nobles laugh, children clap, but the clergy increasingly look on with crossed arms and tight lips. It's only a matter of time before someone officially puts your act on a list, possibly under questionable pastimes or rural menace. You consider skipping the next town entirely, but coin is coin, and soup doesn't buy itself. You make for Tarnov, a mid-sized village with a high opinion of its own bakery and an inconveniently placed well. As you arrive, you notice flyers posted to the trees and walls, festivities. This Saturday, no live animals. You perform on the outskirts instead near the stream where washerwomen gather. The crowd is smaller but friendly. Wojtek does his spins, you juggle 2 apples and a spoon badly, and one child offers you a drawing of a bear that looks suspiciously like a cow with mittens. Afterward, you lean back against a tree while Wojtek soaks his paws in the cold stream. You toss him a carrot, which he catches with a grunt and immediately drops. Carrots are not performance pay. He knows it. You know it. You pull out your meager dinner, a chunk of bread, a smear of cheese, a sausage stub that's seen better days. You break off the best bit for the bear and watch him slurp it down without gratitude. You can't help but wonder what the bishop's sermon will say. Will he denounce you by name? Will he call for bear-free markets? Will he remember the part where Wojtek sneezed on his boots? Probably. Still, you aren't ready to stop. Not yet. This life rambling roads, creaky barns, crowds that cheer and jeer in equal measure. It's more than just performing. It's connection. To your bear. To strangers. To the odd beating heart of the countryside where laughter is scarce and often dearly needed. You think about the bishop's words again. You've never seen Wojtek as lesser. He's not a trick. He's not a prop. He's a partner. A big, smelly, snoring, loyal partner who once saved your life by sitting on a snake. That counts for something. The sun is starting to set, brushing the clouds with strokes of orange and gold. You gather your things, pack up the cart, and whistle softly. Wojtek rises, dripping from the stream, and looking refreshed enough to contemplate walking instead of riding. You leave Tarnov quietly sticking to the side roads, letting the wheels hum you both into the hush of evening. Ahead lies more uncertainty, possibly more bishops, but also more markets, more applause, and if you're lucky, fewer geese. You look at Wojtek as he walks beside the cart, his huge paws silent on the dirt, his eyes reflecting the fading light. He doesn't care about sermons. He just wants his next sausage. You knew it was coming the moment you saw the sky thick with clouds that hung low and dark, swollen with the kind of snow that didn't fall so much as it ambushed. By the time you reach the last outpost before the Hungarian border, you and Wojtek are dusted in white, your cloak stiffening at the shoulders, your boots gaining several pounds in ice. It's snowing sideways now. The wind has teeth. And despite your best efforts to look like a man in control of his journey, you resemble a soggy bread roll with legs. Wojtek naturally is thriving. His thick coat is practically smug, and he trots ahead with the pep of someone who's just remembered they buried snacks somewhere nearby. The border crossing is a single rickety checkpoint shack guarded by a man who appears to have fashioned his hat from two beavers and a moral objection to joy. Papers, he grumbles, not bothering to step outside. You slide them across the little window, your tattered, frequently damp certificate, and a letter from a village headman written in ink, so faded it looks like ghost handwriting. He squints. The bear's name is Wojtek. Profession. You pause. Ambulatory entertainer. He stares at you for a long time, then opens the gate with a shrug. I've heard stranger. Historians still debate how formal border crossings were in the 17th century, especially for traveling performers. Some sources suggest that showmen often paid their way with goods or favors, while others point to occasional official scrutiny, especially during times of plague or unrest. One Hungarian record from 1624 simply lists man with amusing goat permitted entry. You suppose you're one notch above that. Beyond the checkpoint, the road disappears into a fog of snow and unhelpful pine trees. You squint ahead trying to identify the path, but it's more guesswork than certainty. Wojtek doesn't seem concerned. He's sniffing a tree that's identical to every other tree, but apparently smells better. You trudge on. An hour later, you are by all internal measurements frozen solid. Your breath forms icicles on your mustache. Your fingers have gone from cold to numb, to making decisions without consulting you. Wojtek, meanwhile, has rolled in a snowdrift and is now dusted with enough powder to resemble a festive pastry. He's in an excellent mood. You are not. At last, through the haze of falling white, you spot salvation. A barn. A beautiful, lopsided, frost-covered barn with a leaning chimney and a roof that probably leaks prayers. Smoke curls from the chimney, and the distant sound of someone chopping wood promises both warmth and judgment. You limp toward it, knock twice, and are met by a woman holding a ladle like a weapon. She squints at you then at the bear. You're either mad, she says, or frozen enough not to care. Bit of both, you reply. She lets you in. Inside the barn, smells of hay potatoes, and something herbal, possibly soup, possibly witchcraft. You sink onto a bale near the fire, stretching out your fingers until the pain returns with vengeful enthusiasm. Wojtek circles a hay pile twice and collapses with a dramatic grunt. You sip the offered soup onion and something else and sigh as life returns to your limbs. The woman watches you with quiet amusement, then tosses Wojtek a heel of bread the size of a cobblestone. He devours it and flops over like he's won a prize. This is diplomacy in its purest form, food shelter, and not asking too many questions. You learn her name is Magda. She's a widow, a herbalist, and the only person in the valley stubborn enough to stay through winter. She brews teas, dries roots, and occasionally offers shelter to passing fools with frozen noses and theatrical pets. Never had a bear before, she says, sipping something that smells like pine and regret. Had a goat once. Didn't dance. Smart goat, you mutter, pulling your blanket tighter. Outside, the storm howls like a collection of unpaid debts. Inside, it's warm, if slightly haunted. Wojtek begins to snore, his paws twitching as if chasing dream geese. You settle in, letting the warmth creep up your spine, letting your mind float. Magda tosses another log on the fire and turns to you. He's well behaved. The bear. You nod. Mostly. Except when he's hungry. Or annoyed. Or near shoes. She chuckles. He reminds me of my late husband. You grin. For the rest of the evening, you share stories, some true, some exaggerated, all mildly ridiculous. She tells you about the time a local priest tried to outlaw fermented apples. You tell her about the noble who asked if Wojtek could serve as a ring bearer at his wedding. He declined with a sneeze. Historians still argue whether women like Magda Solitary, skilled herbal, were seen as village sages or something less flattering. Some were midwives and healers. Others were branded witches, depending on how much their neighbors liked them that week. You decide she's the first kind. Eventually, the fire dies down and you drift into sleep. The storm rages on, but you're wrapped in warmth, surrounded by the smell of pine bear and faintly medicinal soup. In the middle of the night, you wake briefly to the sound of Magda humming a lullaby while pouring something over a bundle of herbs. Wojtek stirs, but does not wake. You smile, then fall back asleep. You'll leave in the morning once the snow lets up. But for now, you are safe. Wrapped in hay beside a bear, watched over by a woman with a ladle and more wisdom than books. By morning, the storm has softened into a polite dusting of snowflakes, drifting lazily through the trees like feathers that changed careers. You awaken to the smell of something earthy, boiling gently in a pot, Magda's breakfast stew, which she claims is restorative, mildly prophetic, And definitely not squirrel. Wojtek is already up stretching with his tongue out and his back legs extended like an oversized cat. He yawns so deeply, you briefly consider checking if he's swallowed a pine cone. The snow on his fur has melted into damp patches that give him the scent of boiled forest. It's not ideal, but it's familiar. You sit up, brush hay from your hair, and accept a wooden bowl of the stew without asking questions. It tastes vaguely of mushrooms, possibly beet, and something with an attitude. Wojtek nudges you for a share, and you ladle some into his own bowl, which he promptly upends and slurps off the floor like a tavern brawler with no sense of shame. As you pack the cart, Magda appears with a small pouch. For the bear, she says, pressing it into your palm. It's filled with dried herbs bundled with twine and smells like moss and memories. Helps with his dreaming, she adds. Sometimes animals get stuck in the same one, like a loop. This helps them unstitch it. You blink. That's a very specific problem. She shrugs. You'd be surprised. You tuck the pouch into your travel bag and nod your thanks. Magda gives Wojtek a final pat just behind the ears and disappears back into her crooked cottage with the air of someone who never needed applause to know her worth. Back on the road, the snow crunches beneath the cart wheels and the sky hangs heavy and soft like a woolen shawl. The air smells of damp pine and distant chimney smoke. Wojtek walks beside the cart today, paws sinking slightly into the slush snout, twitching at every tree like they're hiding secrets. You think about the dreams she mentioned. It's true Wojtek has always had restless sleep. Paws twitching low growls, eyes flicking behind heavy lids. You've seen him whimper, snort, even stand suddenly as if confronting something invisible. Perhaps dreams do cling to animals more tightly than we imagine. After all, what else do they have to make sense of a world full of humans in hats asking them to dance? Historians still debate the extent to which animals dream as humans do. There are observations of dogs running in their sleep cats, chattering at dream birds, even elephants weeping softly in slumber. But bears less studied. Some scholars believe bears dream most vividly during hibernation, a seasonal plunge into deep, strange memories. Others dismiss the idea as romantic nonsense. You don't. You've seen Wojtek stare at rivers as if expecting something to rise from them. You've seen him pause mid-performance, gaze fixed on the sky, completely still for minutes. Not watching, remembering. Once during a summer storm, he ran from lightning, but not the first strike. The second. As if the memory of the first had bloomed too late. He's not just reacting to the world. He's filtering it through some internal poetry that you'll never fully understand. As you round a bend in the forest path, you spot a familiar clearing by the riverbank. The water runs slow today, half frozen at the edges, whispering softly to itself. You stop the cart and let Wojtek lead the way. He pads down to the water's edge, nose low, ears pricked. He doesn't drink, just stands, watches the current. You sit nearby on a fallen log, wrapping your cloak tighter around your shoulders, watching him. He stays like that for a long time, still, silent. You imagine what he sees, memories of splashing in warmer waters of fish, darting beneath the surface of snow, melting on his paws. Or maybe something stranger. A dream he's trying to unspool. An echo he almost remembers. You reach into your pack and take out Magda's pouch. The scent is stronger now, warmed by your hand. You hold it out. Wojtek turns, walks to you, and without hesitation sits. You tie the pouch loosely around his neck. He snorts, shakes his head once, then settles beside you with a heavy woof. His side presses into your hip. You both stare at the river. A jaybird scolds you from the trees. A fish leaps just once upstream. The moment feels stilled. Not sacred exactly, but tuned to a quieter frequency. You sit like that for a long time. The bear and the man. The river murmuring its secrets. The forest watching unimpressed. Eventually, the sun slides lower, the air sharpens, and you know it's time to move. You whistle softly. Wojtek rises, stretches, and gives one last glance to the water. What did he see there? You'll never know. But he seems calmer now. You walk together, not speaking, not performing, not preparing. Just existing in the white hush of the woods, the path leading forward, the dreams unspooling behind you. It's the manor house that gives you pause, not for its grandeur, which is modest, or its age, which is considerable, but for the polished stone floor at the entrance, which gleams like a frozen lake. You and Wojtek stop just outside the gates, squinting at the marble tile like two country folk who've just discovered the concept of friction. You'd been hired somewhat unexpectedly to entertain at the evening meal of a minor noble who enjoys collecting odd amusements, as the letter put it. You assume this includes bears, perhaps card tricks, and possibly a man who whistles through his ears. The steward who greets you wears a doublet so stiff it might stand on its own. He ushers you through the servant entrance with a look that suggests he considers your bear a temporary architectural feature rather than a guest. Inside, the manor smells of beeswax, boiled meat, and ancestral pride. Wojtek immediately slips slightly on the floor, catching himself with a loud grunt. You follow, your boots squeaking, trying not to imagine your bear skidding dramatically into a suit of armor. The main hall is a low-lit, echoing space filled with tapestry-covered walls and a collection of noble guests who all seem to be auditioning for the role of most indifferently amused. You've performed for these types before, people who clap politely while mentally calculating the value of your boots. Wojtek, bless him, does not care. He walks in with the serene confidence of someone who has already made peace with his awkwardness. The steward announces you both in a tone usually reserved for infestations. Your lordships, the bear. There's a ripple of polite interest. One noblewoman raises an eyebrow. A man in purple coughs theatrically. Someone claps once, then stops, perhaps reconsidering. You launch into the performance with your usual flair. You play a tune on your hurdy-gurdy, tuned only slightly better than your singing voice, and Wojtek responds with his classic moves, the two-paw hop, the hat trick, the dramatic bow. The polished floor, however, is not your friend. With every movement, his paws slip. It's less dance and more delicate wobble. He spins once successfully. The second spin ends with him sliding 3 feet to the left, nearly knocking over a candlestick. The room gasps. Wojtek stops, sits abruptly, and glares at the floor like it just insulted his ancestors. You whistle, trying to salvage the routine. He responds with a paw wave and an exaggerated sigh, drawing a chuckle from a few guests. Then he stands and slides again. This time into a small table laden with fruit. It's not a crash exactly, more of a slow-motion collapse. The table tilts, the apples roll, the grapes cascade in dramatic fashion, and the bear stands among it all confused but uninjured with an apple now somehow stuck to his snout. You rush forward, whispering reassurances, pulling him gently back into position. The steward looks like he's aged a decade. The nobleman of the house, clearly the one responsible for hiring you, chuckles into his goblet. Unexpectedly graceful, he murmurs. Like a bishop on ice. The room laughs. You bow low, Wojtek mimics you with a surprisingly fluid dip, and you decide that's your exit. The applause is hesitant, but real. A few coins are tossed. Someone whistles appreciatively. No one faints or calls for the guards. All in all, a success. Historians still debate how often bears performed in noble courts, as most records focused on musicians, jesters, and more socially palatable entertainments. But private accounts, letters, journals, the occasional diary scribble mention bears more than you'd expect. One noblewoman described a shuffling beast who mimicked court manners better than half the dinner guests. Back in the kitchen hallway, the steward sighs and hands you a cloth pouch. Inside are silver coins, dried fruit, and most usefully a flask of warm cider. He doesn't smile, but he does say, "You've left an impression." As you leave the manor, Wojtek sneezes twice and licks his paw. The apple has vanished. You suspect he ate it while pretending to be offended. Outside, the cold air hits like an old friend with cold hands. You exhale a cloud glance at your bear and chuckle. You danced on marble, you say. Wojtek huffs, possibly in pride, possibly in protest. You make camp in a nearby grove that smells faintly of lavender and horse. The fire you build is small but crackling. You sip the cider, wrap yourself in your cloak, and lean back against the cart. Wojtek curls beside you, his feet twitching occasionally in his sleep. Maybe dreaming of apples, or floors that don't betray him. You think about the noble court, so clean, so polished, so eager to be impressed but afraid to show it. You much prefer the market squares, the muddy roads, the small towns where children gasp and giggle freely. Still, it was something. You stare into the fire, watching sparks rise and vanish. The wind whistles softly through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird calls. Beside you, the bear snuffles and rolls onto his back, one paw raised, like he's still trying to finish the routine. Morning arrives with a whisper, not a bang. Sunlight filters through the bare trees, like it's not sure it belongs there, and the world feels quiet, padded as though everything has agreed to speak in hushed tones. You rise slowly, blanket tangled around your ankles as Wojtek begins his own version of stretching, which mostly involves rolling onto his side and releasing a sigh that suggests he expected breakfast already. You rustle through your supplies and hand him a biscuit. It's stale, shaped like a boot sole, and disappears into his mouth in seconds. He licks his lips, then noses at your coat pocket. You tap his snout gently and mutter, "No second course until I've had mine." Today's road is empty. No markets, no manor houses, no border crossings. Just a dirt path winding eastward toward a cluster of villages that occasionally appear on maps and more often don't. You hum softly as you walk, a tune passed down from your grandfather, part lullaby, part weather charm, depending on who you ask. The journey is uneventful until the late afternoon, when you hear a voice from the woods. "Careful, bear man." The path is muddy enough to steal a wheel. You look up to find a cart stuck half off the road, a mule looking bored, and a woman with a knotted braid and a bundle of dried herbs on her back, inspecting the wheel with the expression of someone who's already tried 3 better ideas, and one bad one. You recognize the look. She's a traveler like you, independent, mud-streaked, possibly hiding something mysterious in her basket. You offer help, of course. Between your tugging and Wojtek's polite nudging, he has a surprisingly gentle nose when he wants to the cart is freed. She thanks you with a nod, then squints at your bear. You treat him well, she says, more statement than question. Better than I treat myself, you reply. She smiles faintly and introduces herself as Aniela, herbalist, tonic maker, wanderer. She's headed in the same direction and invites you to walk together. Wojtek approves immediately. He likes her. She smells like fennel-crushed mint and something vaguely almondy. Also, she's already given him a dried plum. You learn quickly that Aniela has stories, quiet ones, spoken like secrets, unhurried and oddly comforting. She tells you about curing a cow's hiccups with a poultice made of boiled onion skins and river moss, about a village that swore by bathing in nettle water for luck, about a girl who once saw a ghost in a baking tin and refused to eat bread for a year. You don't ask if they're true. You just listen. In return, you tell her about Wojtek's goose duel, about the time he got a pine cone stuck in his nose, and the village where a woman proposed marriage to him mid-performance. She said he had reliable eyes. Historians still argue whether herbalists like Aniela were central to village health or marginalized for their unconventional methods. Some records show that such women were welcomed, even relied upon. Others suggest suspicion followed them like a second cloak, especially if they traveled alone or knew too much about mushrooms. You don't care. She makes the journey lighter. Her laugh is soft but frequent, and when Wojtek decides to nap beside her during a break, you feel the kind of trust that can't be faked. That evening, the three of you find a sheltered grove where the trees bow close together, creating a natural windbreak. You start a fire while Aniela brews tea that smells of lemon balm and something sharper, maybe licorice root. Wojtek curls near the flames, his belly rising and falling like a warm, hairy bellows. You sip your tea. Let the silence settle. She turns to you suddenly and asks, "Do you think he understands more than he lets on?" You look at Wojtek, who is currently trying to scratch his ear with his hind leg and failing in slow motion. Sometimes you say, "Other times I'm pretty sure he's thinking about soup." She laughs. Fair. Then she grows quiet. But when he looks at you, it's not like how other animals look at people. You nod. You've noticed it too. The way he watches you when you play your hurdy-gurdy. The way he steps toward children, always slower, gentler, almost cautious. There's a mind in there. Not a human one. Not quite. But something watching, absorbing, understanding more than he should. Aniela leans back on her elbows, looking up at the stars beginning to flicker through the branches. Some say animals are closer to the spirit world than we are, that they remember things we've forgotten. You don't know about spirits, but you know that this bear who once saved your life by sitting on a collapsed bridge until someone came to help is more than just a dancing act. Wojtek snores, ending the moment with comedic timing. You both laugh. Later, as you bed down, you realize you're grateful. For the path. For the bear. For Aniela's unexpected company. You don't know where she'll go next or if she'll stay with you a little while longer, but for tonight, it's enough to share warmth stories and a bear that occasionally steals someone else's blanket. You fall asleep to the sound of the fire crackling and Wojtek muttering in his dreams, possibly about apples. Morning comes softly, dew sparkling on every blade of grass like someone spilled a bag of diamonds and couldn't be bothered to pick them up. Aniela's already up tending to a small pot of simmering something over the fire. The scent is warm and nutty like porridge that decided to pursue a career in herbal medicine. Wojtek is sprawled out in the dirt, one leg twitching, tongue flopped out like he's trying to taste dreams. You give him a nudge with your boot. He snorts, rolls over, and promptly falls back asleep. Aniela hums a tune you don't recognize. When you ask what it is, she shrugs. A lullaby for foxes. My grandmother swore it worked better than fences. You all eat in comfortable silence porridge-dried pears and tea with a flavor somewhere between bark and blessing. Wojtek accepts a handful of oats, eats them solemnly, and proceeds to sniff Aniela's pack for unauthorized apples. After breakfast, you hit the road together. The trees thin. The land opens into low hills and patchwork fields, the kind of countryside where even the scarecrows look like they're enjoying the view. And then comes the rider. He appears on the horizon like a punctuation mark on an empty page, lone horse, dark coat, purposeful speed. You and Aniela exchange a glance as he draws closer. You recognize the crest on his sleeve. Royal Courier. He reins in beside you, dismounts, and bows. Not to you, to the bear, which is unsettling. Even Wojtek seems confused, licking his nose and eyeing the man's saddlebag as if it might contain sausages. Message, the rider says, reaching into his pouch. From the court. He hands you a sealed letter. The wax bears the royal insignia, the crowned eagle of Poland, claws raised, like it's just remembered an overdue appointment. You open the letter with careful fingers. The writing is crisp, formal, and oddly enthusiastic. To the keeper of the bear, known as Wojtek. It has come to our attention via reliable witnesses and one extraordinarily amused merchant that your bear possesses a unique talent for performance charm and apparent moral restraint. As such, the Court of Warsaw extends a formal invitation for you and said bear to appear at the upcoming winter feast for the entertainment of His Majesty and assembled guests. Attendance is requested within 14 days. Compensation will be adequate. There's no signature, just the stamp. You blink, then blink again. Aniela leans over your shoulder. Well, she murmurs, looks like your bear's going to meet a king. Wojtek licks his paw. You take a deep breath. Warsaw. That's not a quick jaunt down the road, that's a journey, a big one. Roads, weather, uncertain, nobles, more bishops, possibly. You look at the letter again. The phrase apparent moral restraint makes you chuckle. Historians still argue how often animals were presented at royal courts. There are records of exotic beasts, lions from Africa, parrots from India, even a rhinoceros once shipped from Portugal to Rome. But a dancing bear from the Carpathians, that's new. Especially one who once stole a bishop's shoe and then refused to give it back unless bribed with cheese. You glance at Aniela. Coming with? She smiles slow and sure. Wouldn't miss it. That afternoon, you prepare for the road. Supplies are packed. Boots, checked. Cartwheels, inspected with the seriousness of a man who's had one fall off mid-performance. Wojtek is brushed briefly before wandering off to sniff a bush and fall asleep under it. Aniela pulls you aside. There's something you should know, she says quietly. Royal courts. They don't always love what they ask for. You nod. You've thought of that too. You've performed for men who laughed to your face and sneered behind fans. For nobles who saw the bear not as a creature, but as a joke, a novelty. But you've also seen people moved. Children who laughed until they hiccuped. Widows who cried softly into their scarves, watching a big creature bow with surprising grace. And maybe even kings can be surprised. You set out the next morning. The road to Warsaw is longer, colder, and more uncertain than any you've taken before, but it hums under your feet like a song you haven't heard in years. Wojtek walks beside the cart, quiet but alert. Aniela rides the edge, her hair tied back her satchel full of herbs and possibly secrets. You feel something stir in your chest. Not nerves, something more like anticipation, pride maybe, or curiosity. You're not just a man with a bear anymore. You're a man with a summoned bear. As the sun dips behind the hills, casting long blue shadows over the fields, you set camp under a crooked oak. The fire crackles, the tea steams, and Wojtek, curled into his usual lump of fur and muscle, snores, softly, nose twitching as if dreaming of velvet and soup. Aniela looks at you over her mug. Ready? You smile. No. But we're going anyway. The gates of Warsaw rise before you just past midday, framed by frost-bitten trees and stone walls that have seen more winters than most families have generations. You pull the cart slowly through the outskirts of the city, every creaking wheel announcing your arrival like an off-key fanfare. The streets are wider here, cobbled and humming with the clatter of hooves, the calls of vendors, the whispered judgments of well-dressed passers-by. Wojtek sniffs the air with great interest and moderate concern. The smells are foreign roasted chestnuts, city fire smoke, too much perfume. Aniela walks beside you, her cloak pulled tight against the breeze, her eyes sharp beneath her hood. Let me guess, she murmurs. They didn't send directions. You nod. Just report to the castle. As if that's as simple as asking where to find bread. The castle looms ahead, tall, polished, the sort of building that dreams it's better than everyone else. The guards at the gate regard you with a mixture of alarm and amusement as Wojtek lumbers up behind you, his paws echoing ominously on the stone. One of them raises a hand which shakes slightly. Name. You show the letter. The wax seal does most of the talking. They wave you through. Past the gate. Past the wide, echoing courtyard. Past the marble fountain that's currently home to a very bored pigeon. Inside, a steward meets you smiling, powdered, and pretending very hard not to look nervous. This way, he says, voice tight. And the bear. He walks. He does you say. He also spins, but only for snacks. Historians still argue whether court performances like this were intended to entertain or quietly mock the lower classes who brought them. But some scholars suggest the fascination with animals came from a deeper place, an unease, a curiosity, a yearning to witness something not bent to courtly rules, something less polished. Wojtek is led to a side chamber. You're offered a seat in the preparation hall. It's filled with jugglers, flautists, and one extremely dramatic man holding a hawk. You must be the bear man, he says, extending a ring-covered hand. And you're falconer. My hawk recites poetry. You glance at the bird. It glares at you like a tax collector. I believe you, you reply. The feast begins that evening. The grand hall is ablaze with candlelight, the kind that makes everything glow like a fairy tale. Long tables groan under the weight of food. Roasted game pies, shaped like mythical beasts, towers of sugared plums. The nobles are seated fanning themselves with peacock feathers and boredom. You're summoned midway through the meal. The steward steps into the hall with all the gravity of a man delivering an opera. Ladies and gentlemen, we present the Bear of the Southern Roads. You walk out first. The hall falls quiet. Then Wojtek follows. There's a beat. Then a collective intake of breath. Wojtek walks slowly, gracefully. No leash, no rope. Just him ambling into the center of the floor like he owns it. His fur gleams. His eyes are alert. His gait is confident. The nobles lean in. You nod to the musician in the corner. A pipe begins to play. Soft, slow, a melody you suggested earlier. You whistle once. Wojtek rises. He begins to spin. Not a clumsy wobble. A practiced, slow, majestic twirl. He bows, then lifts a paw as if to wave. He moves with purpose, pride. They applaud. And then the hat trick. You place your battered cap on the floor. Wojtek picks it up, gently pads over, and places it on your head with exaggerated precision. The nobles laugh. Real laughter. Delighted. The king himself claps eyes, twinkling. Wojtek finishes with a bow. The applause swells. You feed him a plum. He tolerates it, barely. After the performance, you're invited to dine with the performers at a side table, but still within candlelight range of royalty. You eat duck stuffed with chestnuts. Wojtek receives a special bowl of roasted vegetables and inexplicably one very small pie with a cherry on top. Aniela appears beside you. She wasn't invited, but she's holding a silver token and smiling like someone who just made a court healer very uncomfortable. Did I miss anything, she asks. Only everything you whisper. The night winds on. Music, dance, conversation. The king approaches your table. You rise. Wojtek stands beside you. The king looks at him, then at you. You've made us laugh, he says, which these days is harder than you'd think. You bow. Wojtek grumbles respectfully. You'll receive your coin in the morning, the king adds. And if he ever tires of the road, I imagine he'd make an excellent ambassador. You're not sure if it's a joke, but you laugh anyway. Later, long past midnight, you and Wojtek curl up in the stables beside a fire that someone kind built for you. Aniela leans against a hay bale, sipping something warm, her face soft with sleep. Wojtek snores, deep, satisfied velvet snores. You lie awake for a while, staring at the rafters. You did it. Not fame, not riches, but you walked your bear into a palace and they clapped. Not bad. Not bad at all. The fire has faded to gentle embers, now casting sleepy orange glows across the old timber walls. Outside, snow falls in the quiet way it does when no one's watching, slow drifting like time itself is sighing. The bear shifts slightly in his sleep, exhaling a soft gust of warmth, and you curl closer to the thick wool blanket tucked beneath your chin. The sounds of the court have vanished into memory. No more laughter, no more applause. Just the hum of a distant wind and the steady rhythm of your heartbeat slowing, easing into the hush. Your legs feel heavy now, not with exhaustion, but with rest. The kind of rest that only comes after a long road, when the journey has finally brought you to a place where even your dreams know how to relax. Aniela hums a tune under her breath, barely audible like a lullaby someone half remembers from childhood. The melody blends with the crackle of the last ember and the faint snore of your bear. You close your eyes, letting the warmth wrap around you like a second skin. In your mind, you're still walking the roads, frost underfoot trees overhead, your bear by your side. But now the steps grow slower, softer, and then still. Sleep is here. Let it take you gentle as falling snow, quiet as a bear's breath. Good night. End of script. Sweet dreams.